This is the guy when you can't decide whether you want a tank or a transport. Let's talk about the Space Marine Razorback. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the 40k Tactics channel where we're talking all things Space Marine at the moment. This week it's Tank Week, so we've been going over all of the mechanical behemoths available to the Space Marine army. In this video we'll be taking a look at the Razorback's rules and having a think about how they might fit into a Space Marine army on the tabletop. The Razorback is a light tank with a small transport capacity. In the background it's typically reserved for specialist squads such as command squads or squads that want to achieve a certain mission and they need a little bit more extra firepower to get them where they need to go. It has less transport capacity than the ubiquitous Rhino, as it needs some extra room for all of that heavy armament it's packing on the back. So without further ado, let's get into its rules. The Razorback has exactly the same profile as the Space Marine Rhino, which we've covered in a video earlier today, so consider checking that one out if you've not seen it already. It's a dedicated transport vehicle for the Space Marine Army. It costs 70 points base, but obviously you have to pay for the model's guns. The cheapest way of fielding it in the new Codex is with a twin heavy bolter, which would run it at 90 points. It's quite zippy with a movement of 12, weapon skill of 6 up, a 3 up ballistic skill, strength 6, toughness 7, 10 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 8, and a 3 up save. When it degrades at 5 wounds, the ballistic skill drops to 4 up, and its movement drops to 6. And when it's just on 1 or 2 wounds left, it will be hitting on 5+, and its movement will slow to a mere 3 inches. As standard, it comes with a twin heavy bolter, so 6 strength 5 AP-1 shots at 36 inch range. I've just realised I've already managed to make a small error. The twin heavy bolter is only 17 points, rather than the 20 points it would be for 2 separate heavy bolters. This is presumably because you don't have the flexibility of firing the heavy bolters at 2 different targets. You have to focus it all in one. That makes the base cost of the tank only 87 points with the twin heavy bolters. You can choose to swap out this twin heavy bolter for a twin las cannon. This will put the tank up to 110 points, or a twin assault cannon, which will cost you 114 points base for the tank. In addition to this, you can also take a storm bolter for an additional 2 points. I would always take this. And you have the option to buy a hunter killer missile for 6 points more. This I would think about taking if you're putting your Razorback with a lot of rerolls or if you're running Master Artisans, but I'd think about leaving it if not. The tank can carry 6 normal Space Marine infantry, so no jump packs, no Centurions, no Primaris and no Terminators, so that's enough to fit in a small squad and a character should you desire. It has a few special rules, namely the Angels of Death special rule, which is very useful for giving the tank AP-1 on all of those heavy weapons when it's in the Devastator doctrine. Bolter Discipline will allow you to rapid fire that Storm Bolter at 24 inches when you stay still, and Shock Assault will give you a whole extra attack that hits on 6s. It can explode when it's destroyed, so if you roll a 6 when the model dies, everyone around it within 6 inches will take D3 mortal wounds. And it has smoke launchers. Should you not have any good targets to fire at, then you can think about popping smoke to give the tank an extra -1 to hit in your opponent's next turn. So overall, the Razorback is a light tank that has a decent amount of firepower for its points, and also can hold a small squad of Marines should you want to. The biggest decision when constructing the unit is which main gun to give it, either the heavy bolter, las cannons, or twin assault cannon, and they all certainly have their merits. The heavy bolter is certainly the weakest of the options, but it is 23 points cheaper than the las cannon and 27 points cheaper than the twin assault cannons. Strength 5 AP-1 is a good profile to have, particularly if you're in the Devastator doctrine, as that will give it an extra AP-1, so it will be strength 5 AP-2. Having 36 inch range is also very useful, as it will more reliably be able to threaten enemy infantry units hiding in their backfield, which can be an issue for the upgunned assault cannon Razorback. I wouldn't personally take the heavy bolters if I was mainly looking at using this thing as a firing platform. I would say that these are the choice that you would take if you actually want to make use of its transport capacity and have the tank be a shield to enemy firepower for a Space Marine unit hiding inside. If you were just looking at raw firepower of the unit, the Razorback doesn't compare particularly well against units such as the Whirlwind, which has similar firepower except much greater range and can ignore line of sight. I would say it's certainly a choice worth considering if you're thinking about taking a Rhino for a 5-man squad, as it's basically a decision of whether you would pay 22 points for a twin heavy bolter on a durable platform, and it could easily be worth it. The twin las cannon Razorback is pretty interesting. If I was taking this, I'd mainly be looking to maximise its damage output and not be too concerned about the transport capacity, as 10 wounds for 110 points isn't really all that durable. It's already quite a big threat with 2 las cannons that your opponent might want to shoot, so placing a unit inside only really increases the amount of firepower your opponent will want to target the Razorback with. The twin las cannon Razorback is a reasonably durable platform for 2 las cannons, but has a little less firepower point for point than some other options. For example, a dreadnought with 2 las cannons and a missile launcher is more killy point for point, but less durable. Same for the triple las Predator. It's an interesting comparison with the Hunter, as the Hunter is incredibly cheap at only 75 points for one souped up las cannon. I've actually just done the maths comparing the two, and point for point the Hunter is massively more durable due to it having toughness 8, more wounds, and being massively cheaper. But also, unless you're actually buffing the Razorback with rerolls, say from a Captain or Chapter Master, the Hunter has very comparable firepower to the Razorback against ground targets, and is obviously quite a lot better against air. For that reason, I'd recommend loading up on Hunters before spamming las cannon Razorbacks if you have the option to. And that brings us to the third build for the Razorback, the twin assault cannon, which in my opinion is by far the most interesting. Twin assault cannons really got a buff with the new Codex, having access to Devastator Doctrine and being able to be AP-2 the entire time. They're essentially like Bleach, they will literally kill anything if they're allowed to focus fire for long enough. Any tough vehicles will be wounded on 5s, any infantry typically on 3s or better, and with AP-2 they'll have a very good chance of getting their wounds through. The downsides of the assault cannon Razorback are that it's got a reasonably short range. Transport itself isn't massively durable, as it's only 10 wounds for 120 odd points, and it does have the possibility of getting locked up in close combat, which isn't ideal. All that being said, it is one of the cheapest ways to get these very nice strength 6, potentially AP-2 assault cannon shots into your army, and with 12 shots per turn it can seriously do some work. I could easily see 2 or 3 of these being made as part of a battle line of a Space Marine tank list, either mowing down enemy infantry or chipping away at enemy vehicles with some really good general purpose firepower. So now we've talked about some of the loadouts and the uses for the tank, let's have a look about how we might be able to buff it up to get the maximum amount of potential out of it. There are quite a lot of decent options out of the various chapters, and as always with vehicles, we'll start with saying that Iron Hands is probably the strongest for the Razorback in and of itself. 6 up Feel No Pain adds to the durability, 5+ Overwatch is very nice, particularly if you're firing 12 assault cannon shots at the enemy. Degrading slower is also great, and this tank loves being in the Devastator Doctrine, which the Iron Hands get a buff to, particularly free reroll of 1s and being able to move and shoot with those 12 strength 6 AP-2 shots. Just makes this a fantastically flexible little tank that you can position optimally and get a large amount of firepower from. Ultramarines is also pretty good, particularly as you can fall back, because this tank will need to be close range if it's using the assault cannons, and also being able to fire at full effect on the move is good. White Scars have the option of some shenanigans with transport vehicles, as they have the stratagem to get a unit out after the transport has moved to unleash some close range firepower. Raven Guard or the stealthy successor trait really add to the durability for a 2-up save, and both Imperial and Crimson Fists really add to the firepower of the Heavy Bolter variant, so it's a little bit more worth considering if you're running Fists in the first place. If you're going with either the Assault Cannon or the Las Cannon Razorback, then these are very good tanks to sit in sources of rerolls. It hasn't been very long since Guilliman was seen wandering about with a whole load of Assault Cannon Razorbacks, though admittedly this has got significantly worse since he lost his full reroll to wound buff. But as I said, those strength 6 AP-2 shots are really good general purpose firepower, so if you can give them rerolls of 1 to hit and to wound, then they're going to do more damage to anything in the enemy's army. If you're playing Iron Hands, these things will also love Iron Father Phyros for all of his abilities, including his in-roll save, boosted repair rolls, and his ability to make a unit hit on 2-ups. So how would I think about running these guys on the battlefield? Personally, I'd always take the Stormbolter, and I'd be tempted to run a few Twin Assault Cannon Razorbacks as main battle line tanks, buffed by rerolls, and ideally as the Iron Hands chapter. I would start them somewhere towards the front of the deployment zone, and have them react to enemy threats accordingly, getting just in range to fire their 24-inch assault cannons, while minimising the chance of them getting tagged in close combat. If I was running las cannon Razorbacks, I'd probably want to keep them at the back of my deployment zone, as they have the range to reach out and shoot enemy units without exposing them to enemy charges. But as I said before, I'd probably load up on hunters before taking any of these. If I was running las cannon Razorbacks though, I'd certainly consider either the Salamanders or Master Artisans trait, as having just 2 very strong shots is almost perfect for getting the most out of these rerolls. Finally, if I was using the heavy bolter variant to actually transport things, you could use it in one of a few ways, as we've discussed with the Rhino video. You could have a hard-hitting squad such as Devastators shelter inside it, ready to step out and unleash their firepower turn 1 after they've weathered the enemy's first turn of shooting. Or you could use it as a battlefield taxi to transport an OBSEC squad onto a front field objective, while the Razorback unleashes a small amount of firepower to contribute to your main battle line. Overall, I'd say the Razorback is a decently competitive unit. It's not maybe as flat-out bonkers amazing as some of the other Space Marine options are, but it's a decently durable, good firepower unit that will usually contribute well to any battle that it's in. If I was taking Assault Cannon Razorbacks, I'd certainly consider other similar close-range fire support units such as the Leviathan Dreadnought and the Storm Talon Gunship. Both of these pack a similar amount of medium-strength, 24-inch range shots and have their own positives and negatives. They are both significantly more expensive than but they each have other benefits of using them that counteract this. Another possible competitor for the Razorback's role is the new Impulsor, which can be armed with a missile launcher and a small collection of secondary weapon systems. Again, this has positives and negatives. It's a little tougher and it has the fly keyword, so can fall back and shoot. So there's certainly some positives over the Razorback, but it has a little bit less heavy firepower in my opinion. As per usual, it seems that the Space Marines just have a lot of good options to fill similar battlefield roles, and I could easily see the argument being made for using any individual unit out of the lot. Thanks again for listening to another Auspex Tactics review. If there's any mistakes that I've made, or you can see any other interesting ways to use the Razorback, let me know down in the description. Tomorrow we'll be wrapping up Tank Week with the big daddy of the Space Marine tanks, and we'll be looking at Land Raiders, which, like most of the other Space Marine units, have received some nice boosts in the new updated Codex. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more reviews and strategy content such as this, and I'll see you guys in the next video.